Hi everyone. So Esther McVeigh, who was Department of Work and Pensions Secretary, resigned last week. She resigned. She was one of the 6 or 7 that resigned the day after Theresa May's, or details of this deal that Theresa May has brokered with the EU surfaced. Which, well done to Theresa May. I didn't think it was possible to unite this country with regards to Brexit, but somehow she's managed to do it, even if it is in chorus that they are slamming this deal, Brexiters and Remainers. It's quite remarkable. She's achieved something that I thought was impossible there. But so McVeigh resigned, and the job was given to Amber Rudd. So she did such a good job, Amber Rudd did, of lying about the Windrush affair, that now she's going to transfer that knowledge of how to lie over to lying about universal credit, which is what she oversees as the Department of Work and Pensions Secretary. This is how the BBC reported it. This is just a few minutes ago. Rudd acknowledges problems with universal credit. Amber Rudd has pledged to fix the problems with universal credit in her first appearance at the dispatch box as the new Work and Pensions Secretary. She told the House of Commons that in a very short time she had been in a new department, that she had been seen that the department was a force for good. She said that there were problems with the universal credit. No shit, Sherlock. But she would be listening and learning. Okay. She added, I know it can be better. We have a fair, compassionate and efficient benefit system. How can she say sentences like that without cracking up laughing? We can make changes. I know there were problems and we will be fixing them, she said. She also thanked her predecessor, Esther McVeigh, who quit the post over Theresa May's Brexit deal last week. So that's what the BBC say. Well, rather, they just report on what Amber Rudd said. This was in the BBC as well, same time. I was forced into prostitution by universal credit. Many women are being forced into prostitution because of universal credit. This has been happening a while now. So it's a mess, is what it is. It's an absolute mess. And what I find most infuriating about this is their absolute lack of taking the government's actually absolute lack in taking any criticism on board and fixing it. Everybody knows it's broken. Everybody in the country knows that the whole universal credit system is a sham. It's broken. It's almost beyond repair. If you don't believe me, go and speak to the people that work at Universal Credit. I do. I get this information and they say, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry, I'm doing my best, but the system is broken. So, the United Nations Special Rapporteur, Philip Alston, has done some lengthy research on the effects of universal credit and the effects on poverty in the UK. And let's just say his findings weren't great. This is from The Guardian. It's just outlining his points that he made. On austerity, Alston was critical of the mentality behind cuts and reforms introduced over the past few years that have brought misery and torn at the social fabric. Quote, British compassion for those who are suffering has been replaced by punitive, mean-spirited and a callous approach. On universal credit, he said, the government's ambitious programme to simplify the benefit system was a good idea in principle. That's exactly what I've said. In fact, that's the exact words I've used. But was, quote, fast falling into universal discredit. Oh, nice one. And should be overhauled. It was gratuitously punitive in its effects. Draconian sanctions and long payment delays drove claimants into hardship, depression and despair. And, as the BBC reported, prostitution in some instances. Who suffers? He said this. Changes to taxes and benefits have taken the highest toll on those least able to bear it, said Alston, with the costs of austerity falling disproportionately on the poor, women, ethnic minorities, children, single parents, asylum seekers and people with disabilities. This is something I have raised over and over again. It is punishing the most vulnerable people in society. That is what universal credit is doing. It's punishing them. It's not helping them, it's punishing them. Holes in the social safety net, he said this: massive cuts to council funding alongside big rises in demand for social care had reduced many local authorities to providing basic services only and had heralded the closure of libraries, parks and youth clubs. This was, quote, damaging the fabric of British society and eroding its sense of community. This is a pretty damning report, isn't it? On poverty, Alston said the UK government had told him the social support system was working and that there was no extreme poverty in the UK. That's what the UK government told him. The social support system was working. There was no extreme poverty in the UK. But the individual testimonies he received during his visit told a different story. Quote, of course it told a different story. There is a striking and almost complete disconnect between what I heard from the government and what I consistently heard from many people directly across the country. Digital welfare state, and I've brought this up as well. There are people who can't use computers who are on this welfare now are just getting left behind. Guardian say this: the government's embrace of digital technology and automation was especially visible in universal credit, where the digital by default approach excluded people with no internet access or skills. Quote, we are witnessing the gradual disappearance of the post-war British welfare state behind a web page and an algorithm, Alston said. So it's quite a damning report, that is. In fact, it's an extremely damning report on the government, and it would be it's interesting to see how the government have responded to that report, because Amber Rudd stood up and took a question on it, and Channel 4 have reported on this. Well done, Channel 4, on this. It's not very often I congratulate the British press, but when I do, most of the time it ends up being Channel 4. Read into that what you will. But this is what happened today in the Houses of Parliament. Just check this out.
The report of the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights says that when asked about the problems that universal credit claimants are facing, quote, government ministers were entirely dismissive. Thus far, the government has been determined to press ahead with the next phase of the rollout, despite clear warnings from over 80 organisations working with disabled people who will be affected, that many people could fall out of the social security system altogether and be at risk of destitution. So will the new Secretary of State end the government's state of denial, scrap the managed migration regulations and stop the rollout of universal credit?
So when the denial, scrap the regulation, scrap universal credit, will they do that in response to this United Nations Special Rapporteur's report, which is, quite frankly, damning? I mean, I've only just read you the Guardian's breakdown of it there, the Guardian's cliff notes. You know, at one stage, Alston said that universal credit must have been written by a room full of misogynists because of how it treats women, especially women who are in violent relationships who are on it. This is how Amber Rudd responded to that.
Mr. Speaker, I have seen the report by the rapporteur. I've read it over the weekend, and I must say I was disappointed, to say the least, by the extraordinary political nature of his language.
She said, disappointed by the... I thought, as I heard her standing up and saying that, I thought she's going to say, I'm disappointed, to say the least, at the amount of truth he spoke. I'm disappointed, to say the least, at the amount of problems he highlighted. I'm going to work to fix them. No, she's come out and said, I'm disappointed in the political nature of his language.
We on this side of the House will always engage with professionals, with experts, with NGOs. We are not so proud as we don't think we can learn as we try to adjust the universal credit for the benefit of everybody. But that sort of language was wholly inappropriate and actually discredited a lot of what he was saying. But we look forward to working with experts in the area to make sure that we get the right outcome for the people who we want to look after.
What's the point in... Well done, Channel 4. What's the point in working with experts in the area, Amber Rudd, if when they give their report, you're just going to ignore the report? What is the point in doing that? There's no point in doing that. Here he is. Here's Alston. He's in his own words. Again, this is Channel 4. We've interviewed him. Just listen. This is damning. It's 2 minutes, 46 seconds long. But I promise you, it'll be worth watching. Oh, come on, play.
It shouldn't be like this. Governments can do better. People shouldn't be treated that way. I think that's how I feel, that there's a lot of people out there living in destitution in circumstances which is quite unnecessary, could be obviated very easily.
There are many people who argue there is no real poverty in the UK.
What she means by that is the government say there's no poverty in the UK. You saw me say it in The Guardian. They say that there's no extreme poverty in the UK. I mean, where they're going, come down, come and speak to me. I'll show you it.
And really, you shouldn't be here.
They should have been with me over the last couple of weeks. There are the figures. The think tanks are not doing this in order to keep themselves in employment. Thousands of food banks haven't sprung up because people are looking for things to do. There's very real poverty out there.
You met with government. What was their response?
They were pretty much unconcerned. They think.
You met with government. What was their response? They were pretty much unconcerned. And Amber Rudd is outraged at the political nature of his tone. Forget what he said. Forget the damning information that was in it, and just how bad universal credit is affecting the most vulnerable people in the society. We're all right, Jack. I'll let it carry on.
I think that their policies are working. They focus really only on employment.
What they say, they focus there only on employment. What he means there is they focus only on the employment figures, getting that unemployment figure down to as low a percentage as possible. Let me explain to you. You can have 0% unemployment really easily. Really easily. It's called slavery. And with real wages not going up in this country, actually they're going down, and people having to work 2 or 3 jobs. When the government are jumping up and down saying, yes, we've got unemployment down to 4%, aren't we great? What they're actually saying is, we're only 4% away from getting absolute slavery in this country. That's essentially what they're saying.
Delighted that they've got full employment, which is a great,
that's right, isn't it?
a great
That's a good
achievement.
thing for any society.
It's excellent. And it is a way out of poverty. There's no doubt about that. But the point is that the 1.5 million people who are in destitution are not being covered by the work hours that they're getting. So there's a lot of in-work poverty.
Brilliant. In-work poverty, i.e. people on the gig economy, people not even getting, minimum wage.
As it's described, people who are working for such low money or unable to get enough hours, or even if they're full-time, they're not able to keep their family. You've got the backdrop, of course, of the housing market and all of the other policy issues that impinge upon people's economic situation. But when things are really tough, there is a need for basic forms of government assistance for those who can't quite make it. I think government people haven't been out into the field, haven't had to talk to them, haven't explored what the real circumstances are. So I've had a number of people say to me, but we're not aware of this, we don't think there is poverty in our country. To which I would simply say, open your eyes, get out and take a look at the food banks, I spoke to one minister about food banks and he said, no, this is just it's an occasional phenomenon. And anyway, you have food banks in Canada and the United States, don't you? As though food banks are a good phenomenon and not something to worry about. Things are grim when they're springing up and people have to demean themselves to go along and beg for food. It's terrible.
And you don't think there's clearly enough understanding of that among government, among people making these policies?
I don't think it's seen as a deep indicator of the extent of distress.
Well done, Channel 4, for doing that. Well done. I hope they do. I hope they do segments on this on their main show later, just to highlight just how the Tories just don't care. They don't care. They say that there is no poverty, and you say, well, I'll show it you, and they say your speech is political. I'm disgusted with it. That's Amber Rudd's response. Amber Rudd's response to that report and to that guy, his findings on poverty in the UK and how universal credit is affecting the poorest, most vulnerable members of the society, their response is to say they're disgusted at the political nature of his tone, or words to that effect. So there you go. That's the new Department of Work and Pension Secretary. Different name. Same shit as before, unfortunately. This is going to get worse. We need to get them out. We need a general election now, because otherwise thousands more people are going to die as a result of these cuts. But hey, they don't care. They really don't care. If you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and click the bell below so you get a notification of when I drop further videos. Independent voices like mine, I'm sure you're aware by now, are being censored across all social media platforms, so please like and comment on the videos. That really does help the channel out, and share the videos wherever you can to grow the audience. If you can, please support me on Patreon. You can do it for as little as $1 a month. I cannot do this without your help. I rely on your donations. Thanks very much for your support. It really is appreciated. Until next time, peace and take care.